Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining to this webinar. My name is Federico. I work as solutions architect here at Amazon and selling partner developer services. So I basically provide support to developers, selling partners that integrate with the selling partner API. In this webinar today, we will be focusing on the listings functionality, what we provide via our selling partner API. So yeah, main idea today is that you get an overview of the listing solution on Amazon using the SP API, and you get an understanding of how the different workflows look like and use cases that we cover. The audience for today is really anyone that's interested in integrating with the listings API. That means also if you have already started your integration and you want to know a bit more, or even if you haven't started but you are planning to do it, you are designing a listing solution on Amazon, then this is definitely a good session for you to get more understanding. The goal after this session is that you get again a good overview of what we offer, and then you will definitely have all the resources that you need for successful integration. During the session, feel free to ask your questions. We have a specific tab in the meeting tool, so in the webinar tool, for you to ask questions. There are some colleagues here that will be trying to answer all your questions. If we are not able to answer one for some reason, time constraint, whatever, we will come back to you via email later. And then after the session or before finishing, actually, we will share a survey also. So yeah, we appreciate if you can answer it. That will give us some idea of how we can improve for the next one. And in case you have any specific question, you can also ask there. So let's start. Let me change this one. Yeah, the agenda for today is starting with an introduction of the selling partner API. We will be focusing on three main API sections that we offer for the listings use case. That's the listings item API, catalog items API, and the product type definitions API. We will cover in detail some of the use cases that we support with our APIs and how to implement this, so step-by-step implementation details for each of them. Some best practices we will share with you, and some keys or recommendations that we offer for you to have a successful integration, a robust solution. The use cases that we will be covering are described there in the slides. We will, of course, take a deeper look later. We will also be focusing a bit on notifications, since this is an important part of the integration. And we will spend some time doing a short demo for you to see how the different API sections work. We will have Q&A session at the end. Again, you can ask during the session your questions. We will try to answer. Otherwise, we will take some minutes before finishing for all questions to be answered. Sorry. So let's start with a brief introduction to the selling partner API for the ones of you who have not used it before, or are just planning to integrate, or are even starting your integration with selling partner API. What the SP API provides is the ability to connect programmatically the selling partner business and Amazon. So we support many different use cases. We support order management, listings, of course, that will be the focus today. We support shipping use cases, direct fulfillment, and so on. We have around 30 API sections right now to cover many different use cases for your selling partner. The API is REST-based, which means that it incorporates all the best practices of REST, which you probably know and are familiar with, and as you know, provide a lot of benefits. The selling partner API is based on OAuth, which guarantees that the data is treated securely and you have a secure connection between the business and Amazon. By using the Selling Partner API, you can implement or develop solutions, applications for both third parties, if you're a developer, or for internal use. If you're a selling partner that wants to create your own integration, that's possible for sellers or vendors. Our APIs are constantly evolving. That's something that important to mention. We release new features regularly. We extend the features that we have. We launch new notification types, for example, if you're familiar with them, and so on. So always keeping up to date with the new releases is important. And lastly, we have a new website for our documentation. It was launched earlier this year. In our documentation, you will find that all relevant information is present, like the API models for you to build your client libraries, for example, the use case guides that explain a bit better how to implement different use cases. We have FAQs there. We have some blog posts that will help you understand our API in general or some specific use cases. So we, of course, encourage you to take a look at it. If we move to the concrete API sections that we will be covering today, probably the most important one is the listings item API. This API is the entry point for creating, updating, deleting, and reading listing information from Amazon. It's also JSON-based, so the payloads, the input and output of this API are JSON, which makes the experience much better for you. And we will also see how this aligns with other API sections that we have. We provide with the listings API synchronous feedback for submission errors, so data validation, everything that's important and that you need to know when you submit listing to Amazon. That's returned by our API synchronously. And we also provide the ability to get additional information like the listing status and existing issues in case there are any with our GET operations as well. Some of the use cases that we support with the listings item API is submitting a new product to Amazon. So a product doesn't exist and you are submitting for the first time. Creating offer for existing ASINs, so product that already exists in the catalog. Updating your product with some partial updates, that's also possible. Submitting inventory, cost, price updates, that's a supported use case as well. Submitting images, reading SKUs, as I said before, in case you want to get some information about your listing, that's possible. And finally, getting the post-submission errors. We will dive a bit deeper into this topic when we explain the different workflows that we support. But basically, this is our functionality that we support and will enable you to create an end-to-end experience for you or for your customers. Another important API for the listing functionality is the product type definitions API. This API sections enables the product information that you need to use when you are submitting listings using the listings item API. So all information that is relevant, that means product attributes, data requirements like mandatory attributes, valid values, and so on. That's all information that's provided by the product type definitions API. We support searching for different product types based on keywords. If you need to identify which is the correct category for your product, that's supported as well. Some of the supported use cases are listed here, like retrieving the most up-to-date schema for different categories. So basically, if you want to create listing for, let's say, the shoe or footwear category, you can get that schema with all the important information that you need. You can also get release candidates, which are versions that are not the current valid ones, but will be in the short term. So in case you want to do some pre-mapping or check how a new version looks like, you can also get that one from our APIs. And then retrieving schema definitions that include product attributes, sales terms, or both is supported. So depending on what is that you want to do with the API, what is that you want to submit to Amazon, you can get different information from the API. The benefits of this API section is that the schemas that you get have localized attribute data, which means that for all supported languages for a marketplace, you will get the information if you want. Again, payloads are JSON-based, and we will see how they align between the different API sections later. And then something important is that our schemas can be used in multiple different open source resources that are available for UI rendering, for example, for building a user interface, also for data validation. So there are many open source resources for different programming languages. You don't need to implement your own logic, but you can just rely on those, for example, to create the UI for your product based on these schemas. The next important API section is the catalog items API. This API provides information about products that exist in the in the Amazon catalog currently. Some of the information you can get from there is product details, identifiers, sales rank, images, and so on. So a large list of information that you can get. The data that you get from this API is compatible to the input from the listings item API. So you will see how later how we can just take what what the catalog item API offers and put it in the listings API input and have a successful submission without a lot of effort. Things that we can do with this API are listed there. You can search items in the Amazon catalog by using keywords. If you have concrete identifiers, you can also use those to get your products, like using async, UPC, or many other identifiers. Those are supported. And we recently started supporting also getting catalog items in bulk. So you don't have to get one by one, but if you are trying to get more than one product from the catalog, you can do that with the catalog items API. Let's look now at how a product schema looks like for the ones of you who haven't seen it before. This is basically a JSON schema that the product type definitions API returns when you ask for a specific category. This is an example for the luggage category in this case, as you can see on the ID section, and some of the information that we have here. For example, at the beginning, we have the definitions section, which includes the definition of different attributes that are relevant and used across the schema. In this case, we have marketplace ID. We also have the language tag, for example, which is not displayed, but that's another very frequent definition that you will see in the schema. You can see that we have a list of required attributes. In this case, we have item name, brand, everything that's mandatory for the category that you are using or trying to submit to will be informed under the required section. And then we have the properties. This is basically the different attributes that the product schema or that product category includes. Some of them are shared among different categories, some of them are specific, and we will also see this during the demo. In this case, we have the item name, for example. It specifies the type, it specifies some description for it, and then constraints like min number of items, if there is a max length, for example, and so on. In case there are valid values for the attribute, so there are some attributes that accept free text, some other accept a list of valid list of values, limited number of values. You can also get those from the schema. And we also include examples, so you can understand a bit better what is it that the attribute is about. You can read this example information. You can even use it in your UI, for example, if you want to show to the customer what some attribute is about. One other section that's not here because it's probably long, but it's also included, is a list of rules and conditional validations. We can probably take a look during our demo of this section. And then we have two more similar JSON documents here. On the left, you can see the input payload for the listings API, and on the right, there is catalog items response. So as you can see, comparing to what we saw on the previous slide, the JSON document are very similar, the three of them. As we mentioned before, they are compatible. So whatever you have in the catalog items API response, you can use it smoothly in the listings item input and so on. In this case, on the listings input payload, we have an example for the luggage category that we were seeing before. There is a list of attributes that we included, just some of them, like condition type in this case, item name, and the values for them. You can see that in the catalog items response, the information under attributes is exactly or looks exactly the same as the input payload for the listings item API on the left. And this is what we meant when we were saying that the response from the catalog items API can be used right away in the listings item API. So let's move now to probably a more interesting part, which is seeing how different workflows are implemented with the use of the listings API and the other relevant APIs that we saw. Following the steps that we will describe here, you can guarantee a higher success rate for your submissions. So a solution that will work better for sure. We will be focusing on the vendor use case really today. There are some minor differences when you are submitting listing for a seller and for a vendor, but in general, the API works pretty much the same. There are no big differences, but there are some minor ones that we can also probably mention during the session. But keep in mind that this workflow implementation is focused on the vendor use case initially. So, okay, let's start with the first use case that we anticipated before, which is submitting a new product to Amazon. So in this case, what the selling partner wants to do is create a product that doesn't exist in the Amazon catalog yet, so no one else is selling it, and the vendor or seller wants to submit for the first time. We described here the steps that you need to do in order to fulfill this use case. We can cover. You will see that some of the steps here are the same for other use cases, and some of them change slightly. So in this case, for submitting new product to Amazon, the first thing you need to do is using the search catalog item operation by using identifiers like async, UPC, whatever, or some keywords to confirm that the product doesn't exist, right? So you need to, or you want to make sure that this is actually a new product for Amazon. When you do it, you will see that Amazon returns via the API that the product that you are looking for doesn't exist, so you can safely go ahead and create a new one, right? The next thing that you will be doing is try to find the product type or the category that you need to use for that specific product. So for this, we provide the search definitions product types operation, which is part of the product type definitions API. In this case, again, you use it with some keywords and you will get a list of categories, and from that list you will define which is the one that works for your specific product. And once you have it, you will jump to step number 3, which is getting the actual schema. So the get definitions product type operation provides the ability for you to get the schema that we were seeing before, which will include all the different attributes that you need for that specific product and the conditions for them, like all the constraints, which are the required attributes, and so on. In this case, you will be using the listings requirement in your request to get all the information, so both product data, so the attributes, and also the sales terms, since you want to include also your stock, your price, and so on. The step number 4 in this case is once you have the product schema, you can create your own, the input that you will be submitting to Amazon. This is a JSON document that will contain the product information for each of the attributes that are specified in the product schema that you got in the previous step, right? One important step here before submitting the information to Amazon is to validate that the JSON document that you have and you're about to submit is valid. As you know, there are some rules for what you can and what you cannot submit to Amazon. There are, again, some attributes that are mandatory and you cannot omit if you want to submit a listing. There are some valid values for some of them. So it is important that you validate that what you are going to submit is correct. This is the step that can leverage all the open source resources that we mentioned before. So it's not a big implementation effort you need to do, but it's probably a very important step. Then once you have your JSON document, it is validated, you know that all the basic rules that we define, that Amazon defines, are okay. You can go ahead and actually submit this to Amazon, right? For this, you will be using the put listing item operation, and then your product information will be transferred to Amazon. Put listing item operation from the listings item API is a one-by-one operation. So if you are submitting one product, then that's the one you need to use. If you want to submit data for more than one product, so let's say you have 10 products to submit, you can use another alternative, which we will see later, which accepts bulk submissions also. But in this case, let's limit to the fact that we have just one product and you call the put listing item operation. This API request will return synchronous response to you with some information that will let you know whether the submission was valid or not. If there are any issues, like you omitted some mandatory attribute or you didn't use a valid value for one of the attributes, for example, you will get a response saying that the request is invalid, and then you need to fix and submit again. Eventually, you will get a successful response saying that the submission was okay, and now processing, another stage of processing starts on Amazon side. This processing takes some minutes in general, can be longer or shorter, but in general it is a few minutes. And then once that processing finishes, you will have your product in the Amazon catalog like confirmed, or if there are issues you will need to fix. How to know if there are issues on your submission that were detected on this second stage of processing is by listening to the listings item issues change notification. This is a notification that will be triggered when processing completely finishes, and some issues are detected. Then you can identify which are the errors of your submission, and you can submit back. If you need some more information about the listing, why it failed, and so on, you can use the get listings item operation. This will give you even more complete information about the submission. Eventually, you will fix accordingly, submit again, and at some point you will have successful submission that passes both the synchronous and asynchronous response. At that point, your listing or the selling partner's listing will be live on Amazon. Let's move to a slightly different use case, which is submitting a new product. So similar to what we saw before, a product doesn't exist in the catalog, but in this case, you don't want to create an offer for it. In this case, probably this is something that you or the selling partner would do if they want to test new product, or they want to publish all the product information in advance before a product launch, for example. You don't want to do it last minute, so you want to have your product and then eventually create the sales terms for it. As you can see, the workflow looks similar. The first step is the same, checking that the ASIN or the product doesn't exist, and then getting the correct product type by using the search definitions product type, in case you don't know. If you already know the product type, the category name, you can jump to step number 3. Step number 3 is a bit different to what we saw before, because in this case you are using the listing product only requirement. This means that the JSON document that you get, so the product schema that you get, will not contain the sales terms. So it will only contain the product attributes. So item name, bullet points, and so on, like some attributes that are specific to your category, but everything that's related to the offer will not be included here. Step number 4 and 5 are the same. So creating your JSON document with the product information, validating that everything is correct, mandatory attributes, valid values, and so on. And then step number 6 is again submitting the product to Amazon using the put listings item operation. In step number 7, 8, and 9, you will be again checking the status of your submission for both the synchronous and the asynchronous processing and validation. You will eventually fix if your submission has some errors, and at some point you will get a valid submission and the product will be live, but without an offer in this case. There is another use case that your selling partner could be interested in, which is creating an offer for an existing ASIN. So in this case, as opposed to what we saw before, the product exists in the Amazon catalog, so you don't want to create from scratch, but the selling partner doesn't have a contribution for it, so he wants to create their own, but without changing product data, just having the offer on their catalog, right? In this case, the first step will again use the search catalog items operation, but you are looking for not for an empty response, but in this case you are looking for a concrete ASIN that you get. So you expect the response from this API to give you an ASIN that's the ASIN for the product that exists in the Amazon catalog. You can use the ASIN that you got to get the product information. This is an important step. Since you are going to submit information for a product that exists, you just want to reuse what's in the Amazon catalog without changing anything, but just adding your own sales information. So step number 3 is basically using the get catalog item operation with the ASIN that you got before to get the product data. As we saw in one of the previous slides, the output from this API can be used as it is in the input from the listings API. So you can easily more or less copy and paste what you get from the catalog items API and include it on the payload for the put listing operation. So the JSON document that you will be creating in step number 4. You include the information from the catalog, you include your own sales terms, you validate that the JSON document looks correct and all validations succeed, and then you can go ahead and again use the put listings item operation. Steps number 8, 9, and 10 are again the same. So basically expecting or waiting for the information, the feedback from Amazon that the submission succeeded or not, fixing if there was any issue, and eventually having your product live. So those 3 use cases that we saw before are for creating your contribution from scratch. In this case, for the next use case, we'll be focusing on updating product data. So selling partner already has its own contribution, but there is some partial update that they want to do. So for example, they want to change the item, the bullet points, for example, or the product title or some other attribute. In this case, you don't want to submit everything from scratch because most of the attributes, most of the properties of your product will remain as they are, but you only want to change a few attributes, right? In this case, you will start by identifying which is the SKU that you want to update, and use the get listings item operation from the listings item API to get all the information for the selling partner contribution, the vendor in this case, right? So you use the SKU, you get the information that the vendor has previously submitted and is currently valid and live on their own catalog. Step number 3 is, as always, getting the product schema. This is an important step. We want to get the up-to-date schema before building our own JSON document and submitting the information to Amazon. You can use both listing or listing product only requirements depending on what is it that you are going to update. If you're also updating sales terms, you use the listings. If you are updating, let's say, just the bullet points, you can stick to the listing product only requirement. In step number 4, with the schema that you got from the previous step, you will identify all the attributes that you can edit. This will be marked as editable true. So there is an attribute, a property for each of the attributes that the schema has, which will indicate whether you can or you cannot update that specific piece of information. And then in step number 5, when you create your JSON document, you will be including all the changes that you want to submit. What is that you can submit to Amazon as partial product update is adding new attributes that were not previously in the contribution, updating some attributes that were already submitted before, and also deleting attributes. So those are the things that you can do with this operation. Again, you need to make sure that only the attributes that are editable true are included, because otherwise you will get a failure. If there is an attribute that you cannot edit, that's typically, for example, the brand. You cannot change the brand for your submission. That's an attribute that is defined at the beginning and you cannot change. If you include it in your submission, then it will result in an error, right? You again validate that the data is correct, what you're going to submit, and then you can move ahead to step number 6. In this case, instead of using the put listings item operation as we did before for new products, we are using the patch listings item. This operation allows you to include only the information that's changing, so the payload will be smaller. The likelihood of getting an error is, of course, smaller as well, because you are only including just the information that you want to change and not everything. So the patch listing item operation is ideal for this use case. As always, if you want to submit information for many different products, so in bulk, you can use the feed alternative that we will see later. This is also supported for the patch use case. Step number 7, 8, and 9 don't change from what we saw before. Is again waiting for the response feedback from Amazon and then fixing accordingly in case there is any issue. So with that, we covered basically all the different use cases for submitting new listings to Amazon or updating the ones you have. We will take a deeper look to some specifics that you want to do while using the listings API and the other relevant APIs for the listings use case. In this case, we will see how to submit this information in bulk, what we saw before. So if you want to submit information for more than one product, instead of using what we described with the put listing item or the patch listing item operation, you can use, or you should use, this alternative. Everything that we saw before is for one-by-one submission, but it is, of course, the best practice if you have more than one product to submit to use the bulk alternative. In this case, one probably important difference is that the process is completely asynchronous. So you don't get a synchronous response saying that, for example, this mandatory attribute was missed, but you will get this information in the way you get it from the feeds API, which is more asynchronous, and we will describe in a minute. However, something that is important to mention is that even though we are using a different API, like the fixed API in this case, the input data that you are submitting to Amazon looks exactly the same as the data that you submit using the listings API. So you don't really need to implement different logic for when you submit one by one and when you submit in bulk, but creating the JSON document that will be submitted to Amazon is a one-time effort, because it can be used in both the one-by-one submission and also in the feeds API submission. The relevant feed type in this case is the JSON listings feed. There is a link. We have attached the handout that you can download from the GoToMeeting tool with all the slides and the links, the relevant links, so you can check from there. There is a link with description and some information on how the JSON listings feed look like. In this case, as we said before, we will not be using the put listing item or patch listing item operation, or even the delete listing item operation if you are deleting an item. but we will be using the workflow that's described below in steps 1 to 4. First thing that you need to do in order to submit in bulk is creating a feed document based on this JSON listings feed schema. Again, this is pretty much the same as we saw before, so JSON document with the listing information. But in this case, since you are including more than one item, not just one, it will be more or less an array of JSON documents, right? But nothing really complex. Once you have your JSON document to submit with all the products that you want to update or create in Amazon, you will call the create feed document operation from the feeds API. This operation returns or will give you a pre-signed URL that you can use to upload your feed document, which is the one you created in the step before. Once your feed document is uploaded, you can call the create feed operation, which is basically indicating Amazon that processing can start for the feed that you uploaded. Then step number 3 is basically waiting for this feed to be processed and processing to complete or to finish on Amazon side. Once that happened, you will get a notification. You can receive a notification telling you that processing is done if you are subscribed to the feed processing finish notification. You can also call the feed API to get the status, but then you need to do it every time until you get confirmation that that processing is completed. It is, of course, a best practice to use the notification API and receive notification when processing is completed finally. And then the last step is calling the get feed document operation. This will give you, again, a pre-signed URL that you can use to download the feed processing document or report, which basically will contain all the information for the individual submissions that you included. So let's say you are submitting in bulk 10 products to Amazon. In the processing report, you will get information for each of those. And let's say 9 of them succeeded, 1 failed. You will have this information there. So similar to what you would get from the listings API, but in this case, you get it in a report document that is combined for all the different submissions that you sent to Amazon. We also include a link here and in the handout to the Feeds API use case guide. In case you are not integrated, you are not using it, there is a detailed description of how to implement this workflow. But again, at a high level, it's what we saw before in steps 1 to 4. And then something that we mentioned before is the listings API provides the ability to submit images as part of the listing submission. So everything, images that the Amazon buyers see in the marketplace can be uploaded using these APIs. For listing submission, images are considered as any other attribute, like similar to brand, bullet points, and so on. There are specific attributes for images. We included some examples here, like main offer image locator, which is the big image that you see in the product detail page when you go to Amazon website. There is other offer image locator 1, which is the first small image, and so on. There are up to 9 secondary images plus the main images included in the schema, so you can submit all of them with the listings API. Both the put listing item and patch listing item operations support image submission. So if you want to create from scratch or if you want to update an image, it is supported with the patch operation as well. And which images Amazon supports for submitting via the listings API. These are images that are located in an S3 bucket, so a public S3 bucket. If the bucket is private, that's also supported, but of course you have to provide the corresponding permission so Amazon can go and get the image from there. Otherwise, you can always use HTTP or HTTPS AWS CloudFront endpoints for your images. The images that are already part of the Amazon catalog, in case you want to query them, are included in the get catalog item operation response. So if you want to see which are the existing images that are currently part of the product information, you can get those. And if you want to get the ones that are specific to the vendor contribution, you can also do it by using the get listings item operation. In this case, you will be using the SKU instead of the async, but the result is the same. Finally, we have the notifications section that we mentioned during the description of the workflows before. So notifications are really important. They help improve your solution, so we strongly recommend using them. They increase the efficiency of your product because basically you get real-time information of feedback from Amazon. You always have the most up-to-date or fresh data, so that also provides an advantage to your product. It also reduces the need to poll for data, so you don't need to call our APIs to check if something changed, but you just get the information from us when something changed. So basically, real time, like we said before. This, of course, also helps reduce the usage on your site, so resource usage decreases, and your solution is even better, more efficient. And there are 4 relevant notification types that are included on our offer and are related to the listings use case. 2 of them are related to the product schemas, 2 of them are related to the listings submission. So the ones related to the product schemas are, first of all, the product type definitions change notification type, that's the name. This one gives you information about new or updated product schemas. So whenever there is a new version, for example, for a schema that you use, you can get this notification from Amazon, and you can go ahead, start mapping the new attributes, for example, in case there are any. So you don't need to wait until something fails later on. The item product type change notification type gives you information about new product type name for relevant asins for your business. So it's also important one to be subscribed to. You will be up to date with all the changes if you are using these 2 notification types when something changes on the product schema side. And then the 2 notification types related to listing submission are the listings item status change. This one basically notifies you about any changes to the status of the listing. So whenever listing for reason goes from being valid or live to invalid, you will get a notification. If the listing is invalid, but you fix something and it becomes discoverable, then you will also get notification. So you can be sure that the changes that you do have some effect and what's the result of them. And then lastly, the listings items issues change will give you information about changes that are related to issues in the listing. So whenever there is a new issue or whenever an issue that existed in the listing before is resolved, you will get a notification saying this issue, for example, is not there anymore. Your submission is now valid. Again, we included a link to the notifications use case guide, so you can take a deeper look. In the handout, there is a link to that as well. We will jump to a quick demo now for you to get an idea of how the different API sections that we saw before work. So let me move to this. We will start with the catalog items API. That's the first one we saw during our demo. Our workflow implementation, sorry. So the search catalog items operation is probably the first one you would be using as we described in our workflow. In this case, we are trying to get an item from the Amazon catalog by using, in this case, an identifier, which is the UPC. And we are asking Amazon to include the identifiers, summaries, and attributes. So these sections for the product. In this case, we are sending information for an UPC that doesn't exist. So you can see how it looks like. You get the number of results is 0. Then you know that for sure this product doesn't exist. So if you are trying to implement the use case for new products, then this is the first step that you execute. And by doing this, you confirm that this product doesn't exist. You can go ahead and create your own listing for it. We will change the identifier type to async because I know that this async is actually valid. I will send this request to Amazon and let's see how the response looks like. In this case, we get that the number of results is 1, and under items, we get the information that we ask. So we ask for the attributes. In this case, we have the item weight, we have the bullet points, and so on. So all the information for that product. Let's see what else we get. Here are the identifiers that we also asked. So basically, this is the UPC, and here the marketplace ID. So all relevant information is included. And then we also ask for the summaries, and this is what we get from the API. So now that we use the search catalog items operation, let's move to the get catalog item, which in this case will get the information for one specific product in case we, for example, know the async. I'm reusing the same one for you to also understand how this data is compatible to what we saw before and to what we will be using later. In this case, the attributes that we ask are a bit more. So we ask for the identifiers, images, product type, sales ranks, summaries, and attributes. So depending on what you're interested in, you include the information here, you include the marketplace ID, and you submit the listing to Amazon, the request to Amazon, and you get the information. So again, we have the item weight, bullet point, and so on under attributes. You can see that you get the identifiers. In this case, we asked for the images. So here you have the link. You have the link to the different images. You get the product type information. So if you want to know which is the product type that you need to use for submitting listing, for getting the schema, that's included here. And then some other information that you might find interesting or useful, like the sales rank or summaries. Now that we've used the get catalog items, we can go ahead and try the product type definition operation. In this case, we are going to do a search by using the search definitions product type and use computer as a keyword. So very generic. We should get more than one response or more than one result in the response. And that's actually what we get here. So you can see that we have the computer category, computer add-on, computer chassis, component, cooling device, and many others. In this case, you will be using this API or this operation to identify which is the product category that you have to use. Let's say that the one we need is the computer cooling device. So we will go ahead and use the get definitions product type. In this case, we are including here under product type the computer cooling device, as we said before. The marketplace ID, here we put whether we want the latest version or a release candidate, and some other information like we described during the workflow implementation details, and we send the request to Amazon. This is what you will get. There are different attributes. We will not dive deeper into all of them, but basically useful information for your product. What's probably relevant here is the information under the schema section. So here you get a present URL that you can use to get the actual schema of this category. Let's call the API quickly. And here, like we saw during the presentation, this is a typical product schema. We have the definition section. We have all the required attributes here. We have the properties itself, and then all the rules and conditional validations here. So this is all the information that you need in order to build your JSON document that you will be using to then call the put listing item operation, for example. Let's take a quick look here. What we specify when we send listing to Amazon, we include the marketplace ID, we include the seller ID and the SKU that we're going to submit, and typical payload that you send to Amazon includes the attributes that you wanna submit. In this case, we are including the item name and condition type. I will be using the sandbox endpoint for this use case. Of course, a valid submission would require more attributes like the like the brand, for example, that's an attribute that's required, right? But in this case, for the sake of simplicity, we are including just a small payload with just 2 attributes. If you send the submission, you will see that the response that you get includes the SKU, the status. In this case, it was accepted, so all validations succeeded, and issues is of course empty because, as we saw, the submission was okay. We will see also the patch listing item operation. In this case, submission is similar, but instead of including all the attributes, we will be including only the ones that we want to change. In this case, we have the item name that we want to replace. So now we have a new value here. We include only this attribute because other attributes on the product will not change, and we don't want to submit those. When we send this to Amazon, we see that the submission was again accepted, and we get some additional information. In case your submission is invalid, you will see it here with the status, and you will also see the list of issues under the issues section. So that basically covers more or less end-to-end the workflows that we described before. There are many more things that you can do. Like we said, you can use the Fits API to submit in bulk and so on. But of course, we don't have enough time to cover all of them. But keep in mind that this is also possible. You can refer to the documentation that we shared in the handouts for the different implementation details. So that was basically it. Thanks again for joining. I hope this session was useful. We look forward to your listings solution on Amazon, and we hope the journey is a good one and successful for you. Thank you very much.